from Xi Jinping, giving him the upper hand and giving him this chance before the November meeting when he expects to have the third term, to build up his reputation, that despite having committed aggression against India and India's firm stand that it will not allow normalization unless the status quo ante was restored, or at least unless the consequences of the aggression were removed, we would just give him a diplomatic victory. Why should we do that?
So you're saying no question of any ad hoc meeting with the Chinese unless there is a clear agenda as to what the Chinese have in mind. Brahma Chellaney, as someone who over the years has been very skeptical of the Chinese, do you believe that 2 years after Galwan, and given what's happened earlier this week in terms of disengagement that's taken place, that this is an appropriate time to at least break the ice?
Well, there are two things we should remember. First, China is playing the long game in the Himalayas through its frenzied buildup of warfare infrastructure. We have seen new security installations, roads, helipads, electronic warfare facilities, dual-use border villages, and other infrastructure coming up. These new and emerging realities hold long-term military implications for India. They go beyond what's happening in Ladakh. Second, which is even more important, China's strategy is to keep India engaged while it quietly contains India. Engagement with containment has been China's strategy much before Xi Jinping became president. So the hype in India over any meeting between the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese leader plays directly into China's hands. Remember what happened to the Wuhan spirit and the so-called Chennai Connect? It only created self-delusions in India. It is also worth remembering that China is a very skilled negotiator. We are seeing the impact of such skilled such negotiations in Ladakh. China first caught India off guard by making several encroachments on Ladakh border areas in April 2020. After that, China has skillfully used lengthy negotiations to take India round and round the mulberry bush and eventually compel India to accept realignment of the Ladakh frontier in 4 different areas. China so far has refused to discuss with India its biggest and deepest encroachments in Depsang and Demchok. But it has foisted buffer zones in 4 other areas that it encroached upon. And these buffer zones have come up largely on land that India considers its own territory. And each buffer formalizes a changed territorial status quo to China's military advantage.
No, but should we not send the message therefore to the Chinese, use this occasion to say that it will no longer be business as usual? I'm showing those pictures from a few years ago when Prime Minister Modi took President Xi to Ahmedabad and there was this bonhomie and the Ahmedabad spirit. Are you saying that until we get commitments on Depsang, on Demchok, we don't move ahead? Is that what you're saying, Professor Chellaney?
Well, first, it's already business as usual. In the 28 months since the Chinese encroachments occurred, despite their ongoing Chinese border aggression, we have allowed Chinese trade surplus with India to spiral to such an extent that last year it overtook India's total defense spending. In a way, India is rewarding China. Far from imposing any costs on China for its aggression, India is letting China have its cake and eat it too.
Okay, those are strong words. KC Singh, your view, the first opportunity in a way since Galwan for the two sides to meet face to face, should we be taking advantage of it or wait to see what the Chinese have to say before we even agree to any kind of direct communication between the two leaders?
Rajdev, we already know what the Chinese want to say, because after the so-called withdrawal from Gogra Hot Springs, their foreign ministry spokesman contextualized it. He said there's no question of status quo ante because we haven't crossed the LAC, India has. And what complicates is that the Prime Minister right at the beginning said Chinese have not crossed the LAC. No, therefore I totally agree with Mr. Sibal. And
countries at the SCO to seek greater support. how does India at any stage look at the other countries at the SCO to seek greater support for India's position on our concerns on the border, both with Pakistan and with China?
First, as an organization, the SCO hardly meshes with India's interests. It is increasingly dominated by China and includes India's other regional adversary, Pakistan, which has virtually become China's vassal state. In fact, if you recall, Rajdeep, China ensured that Pakistan joined the SCO along with India.
That's right.
So as to offset India's entry. China has similarly linked India's admission to the nuclear suppliers group with Pakistan's entry. For India, the SCO may hold some value, even if limited value, as part of India's multi-alignment strategy, especially balancing India's widely perceived tilt towards the West. So to show that India prizes its strategic independence, India's participation in SCO meetings may have some symbolic value, but the SCO offers India no strategic value. On the other hand, India's membership in the SCO enhances the importance of the SCO. It lends respectability to the SCO, which otherwise would be seen as a China-Russia enterprise involving autocracies. India is the only established democracy in the SCO. Without India, the SCO would be portrayed as a club of autocracies. But to answer your question on Pakistan, this would be an odd time for India to renew its relationship with Pakistan, given the fact that the US at present is renewing its coddling of Pakistan. The US is now beginning to rearm Pakistan, as the latest F-16 deal shows. Modernizing Pakistan's F-16s will mean arming Pakistan against India, making the F-16s more combat-worthy and deadly against India, blunting India's Rafale advantage. And also, let's not forget that in recent days, the Americans have helped Pakistan to secure a very large IMF bailout of $1.17 billion. And the Americans are also pushing to drop Pakistan from the Financial Action Task Force's so-called grey list. The Financial Action Task Force is going to meet next month at a plenary session. So here we are seeing the mollycoddling of Pakistan. The Pakistanis have not snapped their nexus with state-nurtured terrorist groups.
Right.
If at this time Modi were to reach out to Pakistan, that would really be an inopportune diplomatic overture on India's part.
I take all your points. Final word to you, KC Singh. Therefore, given the limitation, and I think it was very well put just now by Professor Chellaney, this gathering at the SCO, India standing out in a way as a democracy surrounded by autocracies, what really can one hope for from a meeting at the highest level that the Prime Minister is having in a multilateral forum, Albert? Can you see any forward movement at all?
Look, firstly, coming